Hello, welcome to Speech Talk Live. My name is Jay Oza. I'm the host of the show, and I have Julie Finkelstein, who is a mentor for the Coursera's course Introduction to Public Speaking, and a regular participant on this show. So I'm very glad that Julie can join today and participate. Uh, I am based out of Hazlet, New Jersey, and that is close to New York City, about 50 miles away from New York City in New Jersey. And I do three things. I work as an independent consultant. Second thing I do is I'm beginning to write a book now. I'm currently working on a book on public speaking, which is a different angle, trying to get people to become a effective public speaker quickly. And I think there is a gap that exists there that I think I can perhaps help people who are struggling with becoming an effective speaker. So we can talk more about that in the future shows. But a lot of the stuff that I do discuss will show up in the book, so you know that it's hard to get the book out of your head whenever you're working on it. And the third thing that I do, which I enjoy a lot, is the show, Speech Talk Live. And this show allows me and people that like Julie, Soumya, and Litesh who join us, it's an opportunity for us to do several things. One is to talk, right? If you want to become a good public speaker, you got to start with talking to people and talking about simple topics as well as more complex topics in an effective way. That's the only way you're going to know how you're coming across. And we record these shows. So once it's recorded, I get an opportunity to go back and see how I came across. How did I sound? Was I effective? The reason we created this Speech Talk Live, and this is our 13th episode, is for four reasons. This came out of, we're closely associated with the Introduction to Public Speaking course that Coursera teaches. But what we try to do here is a little different. That course has more of an academic bent to it, right? This one is more practical. So it kind of bridges the two. It kind of combines the two. The academic side, which I think is very important. Everybody should finish that course. And then when you come to this show, it's more practical. This is where the rubber meets the road. These are the kind of speeches that you're going to give in front of a live audience. And you want to get that feedback or an opportunity to practice. So to put it quickly, to make it short, the purpose of this is to learn. We're all trying to learn to become an effective public speaker. The second thing is to teach. This is our 13th episode. Julie has participated in pretty much all of them, and she has learned a lot that she can also teach other people. So part of it is also we're all a student and a teacher of public speaking. So one of the things we do is not only learn but also to teach, because that's the only way you're really going to learn too. The third thing is to share. We record speeches and we bring it up. We have them get reviewed here so that we can learn, get feedback so we can improve. Second is that other people can use it to make an improvement if they're shy and they don't want to record it. So it's an opportunity to do both, to help us and to help others. And then the last thing is to support. This is a support show. Show is not only to learn, but to support people who want to become an effective speaker. And one thing I have to tell you is that sooner or later, you're going to have to come and do this type of show. Otherwise, this is where you can take the kinks out of your speeches. If you're not doing it here and you're doing it in front of a live audience, then they're not going to be that forgiving. This is where you're going to see how you're coming across and get feedback from people who are there, who are rooting for you. So if you're watching this, I strongly urge you to get in touch with me or participate or even record a speech and saying, hey, this is a speech I'm going to be giving and I'd like to get some feedback, and join it. We're not going to be mean. We're pretty nice people, right? We're like Donald Trump. We're very nice. People love us. Okay. So that's me. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Julie. And after that, we'll get started. I always tend to forget this. So there are three segments that we do on this show. The first segment today, we're going to focus on humor. This is something that is very tricky. And I wanted to have a short discussion around that, give you my input into how I pursue humor, what I think of humor, and how I use it. And then I'd like to get Julie into the discussion and have her give her feedback. And again, we can't cover a lot in this topic, so we're going to get started. The second one is one of the speeches that I had recorded a while back for this course called Introduction to Public Speaking. And I'm using this speech because it was a persuasive speech. I want to get feedback. And also, I want to use this speech to see how it can help others who have to give similar kind of speech. And third thing, for third segment, we review a public speech. And today we picked a very good one. This is the one that Simon Sinek gave on Start With Why. When he gave it, I think it was a TEDx speech. Since then, it has gone viral, and he's become very famous with the speech that he has given on Start With Why. So we're going to review that and look at some of the things he does really effectively in this speech that we can all take away. So at this point, I would turn it over to Julie and let her introduce herself, and then we'll get started with our first segment. Julie, take it over.
Thank you. Hey, Jay, good morning. It's always great to chat with you and to do the show with you. So thank you. Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's morning here. I'm based in Stamford, Connecticut today and for many days to come. Yes, my goal is basically to have some skill sets for strategy for success. And I have a background in IT. I ran my own business, and I've done a lot of body, mind kind of work. So I want to combine that to do that. And one of the things I really enjoy participating in this Google Talk, it does give me an opportunity to practice speaking, both speaking and conversing. I think they're really critical skills. One of the things I can say for sure is I thought I was pretty good during my years in corporations and as a consultant, but I can tell you, I wish I had those skills then. Finally, I moderate a Google community. It's associated with this class called Introduction to Public Speaking. And my goal there is to increase the success rate of students passing through the class. I think right now, I just did a study, did some research, and I think there's like 2 out of 1,000, ballpark, 2 out of 1,000 people who sign up who complete the class. And my goal is to increase that pipeline. So even if we double to 4 to 1,000, that's enormous. So one of the things I do to support that is to take notes. And you can access that at the Google community called Introduction to Public Speaking, Coursera. And finally, I'm doing some free online classes. One of them is Saturday mornings where we actually practice reading, because sometimes I think before you can speak and converse at a public forum, it's just comforting and easy entry, streaming into this public speaking with reading good literature, and then we do some discussion. And I'm going to integrate into that some idea of what people's goals are, and to get feedback on that. And then also in the mornings, I have a basic stretch class that is a meditative stretch. So with that, I look forward to doing this speech, and it certainly makes me feel more comfortable speaking in public. So thanks, Jay.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I really appreciate you taking time out and participating in this course. I think your input is extremely valuable and very useful. You have a very good insight since you have so much experience in the corporate world. And one of the things that I see when I do the reviews for the introduction speeches is exactly what you just mentioned, that a lot of people understand the importance of public speaking, but they get started. But the thing that I think one of the things we try to emphasize here is that speaking is something you just have to keep doing it. That's the only way you're going to get better. There are no shortcuts to this. And I really appreciate the work that Julie is doing as far as, and she's very committed to this, and I really admire that she really wants to help people, because as she just mentioned, that if she had known this much earlier, well, she has been highly successful in her career, but she still feels that if she had these skills, who knows where could have led other people. And she wants to make sure that there are a lot of people who are taking this introduction to public school course, public speaking course, can really benefit and take advantage of it. So Julie, I want to thank you for all the work you do in helping the students, and also in the part of the process, not just helping, but you're also acknowledging something that's very important, that you're also a student. And I think that's very important, that a lot of times we have people that are coaches, and you can't really coach unless you're also a student. And I think you kind of exemplify that, of a coach-student type of a relationship that you like to have with people, which is excellent. So anyway, Julie, thanks a lot. And at this point, I'm going to take a brief pause, and then we'll get started with our first segment, okay? Okay, welcome back to Speech Talk Live, episode 13. And we're going to do segment 1. And segment 1 today, the topic that we have picked is humor. And you know, one of the things that you always hear people tell you when you take a public speaking course, or that you should try to use humor. But what they don't really tell you is that humor is not that easy. It's hard. Most people try, and it pretty much botches their speeches right from the beginning. And this is some topic that I wanted to have a discussion, because it's one of those things you always hear about, that, oh, he was so funny. Oh, he was just, he brought people on, you know, off their feet, or etc. And I don't think people ever explain what is humor and how it really works and when you should use it. Because let's face it, I'm not a comedian, okay? I'm not Jerry Seinfeld that I'm going to make people laugh, and that's not my goal. And most people, when they think of humor, they think of being a comedian, and that's not what, you don't want to be a comedian when you're giving a speech. If you want to be a comedian, then be a comedian and get people to come and see your act as a stand-up comedian. You'll see that the stand-up comedian are not speakers. They're just comedians, and they have perfected that skill. There's so many aspects of humor that we don't even realize. It has to appeal to us in such a way that many of us don't really understand how it really works. And so in this topic, I wanted to touch upon humor. What is the humor that I use, and what is the humor that really works? First of all, let's put it this way. If you're not funny, avoid humor. You're better off avoiding humor altogether if you're just, nobody's ever told you, or they smile at what you're saying, or they think that you're funny. If you haven't heard that, then you're probably not. And the best thing to do is avoid it rather than to use it and it not working. So my first suggestion is, don't use it if you're not comfortable with it, or if you just don't think that you can pull it off. Okay, that's a safe thing to do. The second thing is, if you are funny, some people are funny. We see them all the time. Our friends, they're funny. They always have something funny to say. But when you're giving a speech, you don't want to wing it. Dangerous. That's the most dangerous thing you can do in a speech. Try to be funny on the cuff. People that are comedians, the stand-up comedians that you see, they're not doing it like off the cuff. They have rehearsed it many, many times. I was reading this book called Small Bets, and what Chris Rock, and I'm sure many comedians do this, before he ever does a live stand-up comic routine that you probably see on YouTube, he goes through these small clubs where he's trying out these jokes, and he's not there really to make people laugh. He's there to test it out, to see what's working, what's not working. The people that are there are kind of bored, because he's more interested in trying this thing out, trying this different things out, what's getting the reaction, how do people react to it, how does he need to modulate it, what does he need to do. He's sort of experimenting, and he does that at these small clubs so many times before he has it down, so that he can give that as a 1 hour or hour and a half stand-up routine. So the point is, when it comes to humor, do not wing it. It's the most dangerous thing. It'll backfire on you. The third thing is, if you want to be funny, practice. And this is something that you have to really practice and test it out with, your kids, maybe your wife, husband, maybe your friends, maybe some people that you meet casually, and see how they react to it. If they're like smiling, then it's good. That means it's working. You can say, okay, I got something. But again, you need to know the audience. It may not work. It may work for some. It may not. Like some of my jokes, they never work with my daughter. I don't know why. Maybe she needs a humor injection or what, but it doesn't work with her. And it works with my aunt and uncle. And I don't know, maybe they think I'm just funny. So it varies, right? Like right now, Julie's smiling, and that's good. Maybe it's working on Julie, but it doesn't work. Sometimes my wife, like, will make faces like, that wasn't funny. So it hasn't. I have to come up with the new jokes or something. But anyway, the other thing to when it comes to humor is stick with observational and contextual humor. Things that other people can all relate to. The other thing that humor also is that even if you think that what you're saying will offend one person, avoid it. It's just not worth it. Humor is one of those things that some people get it and some people will not get it. There's nothing you can do about it. But if you think there is something inappropriate, the best thing to do is just avoid it altogether. The last thing I'll say about humor is, and then I'll give you some examples on some of the humor that I work on and how I use it and how I practice it. The last thing is very important. The best way to use humor is, if you are going to humor, is use it on yourself. You're the target. Make yourself the target, the self-deprecating humor. That works. And hit high. One thing you never want to do is hit low. Don't pick on people who are sick. Don't pick on people who are like homeless or poor or anybody. Hit people that are high. Politicians are fair game. Celebrities are fair game. Athletes are fair game. These are public people. They're used to it. They can take it. But don't pick on people who are going through some kind of tragedy. That's a bad thing too. People who are doing well, like right now, you can pick on Donald Trump. Okay, Donald Trump is a fair game. He's definitely a fair game. But don't pick on somebody like, let's say, Vice President Biden, who just suffered a tragedy when his son died of cancer. You don't pick on him, even though after a month, after some space, that he would be a fair game. But you got to really know it. Humor is very tricky. That's why I always tell people, if you're not sure, avoid it, because it can really backfire on you as a person. You can come across looking very insensitive, and it will reflect. It will dominate your speech if your humor doesn't go well, because it has that type of power. Okay, so let me just give you an example on how I practice humor. So this is like an observational humor where I don't think I'm hurting anybody, and it comes from golf. So I don't know if many of you watched the last US Open, and there was this player at the last hole. His name is Dustin Johnson, and he hit a terrific shot on the 18th green, the second shot, and he was about 15 feet from the hole, right? And if many of you may not know this, but Dustin Johnson is married to the daughter of a famous ice hockey player named Wayne Gretzky. And Wayne Gretzky was watching it. It was like a little slope there. He was on top of the slope watching, and he's excited. His wife was there, and his grandson was with him too, and they're very happy because they think that at best he's going to make that putt to win the US Open, and at worst he'll make the follow-up putt and and go into a playoff the next day. So anyway, so that's the context, right? So what happened is that he ended up missing both putts, and he lost to Jordan Spieth. So next day when I go to my therapist, I had prepared this joke. I had worked on it, and I said, when Wayne Gretzky was watching that putt that Dustin Johnson had to make, I bet he was telling his grandson, don't worry about it. Even your grandfather can make that with his hockey stick. And he thought that was funny. He said, I'm going to go tweet that. He said, I'm going to go tweet that to everybody, that putt looks so easy to him that he's telling his grandson that even I can make that with the hockey stick. Don't worry, your pop is going to definitely make it. And as it turned out, he didn't. So there's an example that I had to take that incident and turn it into something funny. Now, I only got to use it when I went to see the therapist the next day, and he thought it was funny. And I'm just using it here to give you an example that humor is something you have to constantly work at it. Another example that I mentioned is like Donald Trump. Now, I said Donald Trump is a fair game, but again, when you're using humor, don't don't try to overdo it. To do it so that other people will smile. You don't want to make them laugh, and you don't want to offend them, because there could be some people who would support him may take it in a wrong way. So here's a Donald Trump something humorous that I've observed. And I don't know, I don't think this will offend anybody, but I think it's pretty funny. So Donald Trump got fired from this apprentice show that he was doing. So everybody thought, oh, finally, we're not going to see him on TV. But now that he's a presidential candidate, he's on all the channels. And I'm like, wait a second. I thought he got fired from the show Apprentice. We'll never get to see him again on TV. And now I see him in the morning, I see him in the afternoon, I see him in the evening. So he's having the last laugh here that, I got fired from one show, but now I'm on all the channels. So I thought that was kind of funny. The other thing also about humor that you want to be careful is that if you think something is so funny, it may be funny to you, and it may be really funny to a very select number of people, but for many, it'll completely go over their heads. So I'll give you an example of this that happened to me. So one time I had purchased this deodorant, I believe. It was something called Axe. And somebody pointed out, I don't know who it was somebody, and they said that, this Axe that you sometimes, I had no idea. I just bought it, was on sale at Costco. Sometimes you see something at Costco, they say, okay, you get $3 off. So I bought it. I said, okay, I'll just keep it. And somebody said, this is something that I see all these like teenage boys use. So I took that as an example. And then I found out something interesting about Axe. Axe, R&D for Axe is done where I live, in Hazlet. There is a facility here called IFF, International Flavors and Fragrance, which is amazing. They're in Hazlet. Hazlet's not famous for a lot of things, but it's famous for Axe, deodorant that all these teenage boys use. And so one time I was cracking a joke, and I said, when somebody mentioned it to me that this is what the teenage boys use to attract teenage girls, I said, when I heard that, I felt like that character Humbert Humbert. And most people don't get that. Now, most people probably wouldn't get that, because Humbert Humbert is a character from one of the famous novel called Lolita, and it's about him seducing this 12-year-old girl. Now, this is it's funny if you read that book, but most people have never read that book. They have no idea who this guy Humbert Humbert is. It is one of the most famous novel. I'm sure some college professors a literature professor will find that funny. So avoid those type of jokes. They don't work, okay? Something that may be really funny to you, but it's probably not going to be funny to, so play it safe when it comes to humor. And one last thing that I will point out is something that Ronald Reagan used to use, parables. And one of the things that he used to use when he was, I think this was when he was president, or even maybe before president, when he used to point out the deficiencies of a communist system. So he used to tell this parable that this man got a letter saying, hey, you can come and get this car that you wanted to purchase. So the man goes to this agency and he says, oh, your car, you definitely are going to get this car, but it's going to take you 10 years, and you'll have to fill out all this paper. And he goes to the last agency to set up an appointment, and the man asks, when would you like him to come? And the guy asks, well, is it going to be in the morning or afternoon? So the agency is like asking him, like, well, why does it matter? It's 10 years from now. And the man says, well, because my plumber is coming in the morning. I thought that was pretty funny. And Reagan, I'm sure, probably have said that much better than I just did. But sometimes a humor can capture a point really well if you know how to do it. But the point I'm making is that if you're going to use humor, test it out. Don't just try it like I didn't test this out. As you can see, it probably didn't go well. But the key thing to remember is that humor is very effective. Sometimes even one humor tidbit that you're using, treat that separately and practice that on its own, because if you don't, it could potentially backfire and it could reflect poorly on your speech. So at this point, I'd like to get Julie's feedback on how she uses humor and what does she think of humor, or is it, and see, what has worked and what hasn't worked whenever she's tried it. Julie?
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, I have about 3 points to make, and the first one is that, yeah, humor, especially you had said no laughter, but laughter or even a big smile is a physiological reaction, right? Looping into the Simon speech later, a lot of our feelings of connection comes from our gut. Our limbic brain there's a lot of endorphins, dopamine and serotonin that goes from the gut into the brain. So when you use humor, you're actually activating this emotional connection that is deeper than words. So I think the humor is a really very interesting tool, because you want people to connect with you on an emotional level, because otherwise what you say makes no sense, as we will see more in Simon's speech. So, and the other thing I want to say is I do want to include more humor in my speech, and I tend to be able to incorporate humor spontaneously in conversations, and you've seen me doing that in these speeches. But when I come on the videos to make a speech, instead of having like a dialogue, I lost my sense of humor. So that's an area I can practice. So thank you, and it was your suggestion that that I could imagine that I am speaking to a real known audience, and I have to know who I'm talking to before I can be funny. So, and one of the things I like to do is make faces, like. And that's funny, and that relaxes people, and there's opening, right? Because people sees my silliness, which makes me vulnerable, and then they can connect into me that way. So that's how I use humor. And the last point I want to make is actually I have 2 more points, but the last one's really quick. Is when the professor in the course talk about humor, I'm not sure where that is. He did say you don't have to make a joke. It's not always a joke. It could be body language, or like you said, the contextual saying. And the last thing I want to add is that watch out for sarcasm. Don't use sarcasm, which you've kind of said is, go after the higher people, not the lower people, and don't be offensive. Don't attack people. Do not do ad hominem. And with that, I can turn that back to you. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, Julie, those are all excellent point that you just made. Yeah, I think what Dr. McGarity said was that you don't want to be a comedian, because the main thing that I want to point out is you do need to work on humor, because it enhances your speech. And one of the things that about speech that we all need to remember is people do not remember that much when you give a speech. They will remember stories. They will remember something that is funny, that says, wow, I never really thought about that. Now, this thing that I just said about Donald Trump, I think people will remember that, hey, that's interesting. That's a very good observation that you made. And if it's a humorous observation, it really helps you enhance your speech. And you have to work on that. That's not going to come automatically. And like I said, you don't want to wing it. So you really have to take something. I'm of the opinion that everything that is, you got to look for, if you want to be smart, okay, this is you may not agree with me on this. I think if you ever want to show that you're really smart, find humor in anything. And if you can find humor in something, that could be even sad, that could be as simple as getting out of the house. If you can find humor in that, then you are smart, because that's how Jerry Seinfeld and David, I forgot his name. That's how they started the Seinfeld show. It was a show about nothing. It was a show just about observation, and that, according to many, is the most the best comedy show ever produced. And all they did was they just looked for simple things that we all see. I mean, that shows a very good way to look in increasing your your humor muscle by just watching Seinfeld. That they'll take something as simple as like stock investment that I used in a past speech. Could be something as, getting a job or doing something or going to a laundry or getting a soup, all observational stuff. And you can do the same thing by just going to a restaurant. You will find something funny. You will find something funny about this hangout. I mean, I can find a lot of things funny about this hangout. That's not going to offend anybody, but most of it could be on myself. But you have to do that. If you do that, then you're not only going to come across as somebody who is really intelligent, but who has a lot of insight, because humor is insight. One of the most intelligent person that I remember was George Carlin. George Carlin had tremendous insight on things, on politics, on just about everything. The guy was a comedian, but I thought he was really an intelligent person, because he came up with things that I never even remember seeing it. So sometimes when I see comedians that take some topic and make it funny, I really respect that, because that requires a lot of work, a lot of deep insight, and a lot of practice. So I think the thing I want to emphasize here is, don't just ignore humor, because people do want, when you're giving a speech, part of it is not just the content alone. Part of it also, one of the major part of it is entertainment value. By entertainment, I don't mean you have to act like a stand-up comedian, but people have to feel like, wow, not only I got the content in a particular way that I'm just not going to forget it. And for that to happen, these are the techniques that make it happen, whether it's a parable, whether it's a story, whether it's something observationally funny, contextually funny. That's what makes people remember you, makes your speech, it enhances your speech, it makes you a much more effective speaker. So, Julie, any final thoughts on this, Julie?
No, I appreciate your notes, and the last thing I got, I think it's really important, is that observation leads to insight, and insight leads to being smart. To me, like wisdom. I appreciate that very much. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot, Julie. So at this point, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll go to the peer speech review. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back. This is Speech Talk Live, episode 13, segment number 2. And in this segment, we usually use segment 2 to review a speech that is done by one of us or other people. We're not professional speakers. We don't get paid to speak, at least not yet. And get feedback to see what we did well, what we could have done better, and how some of the things we did can help others. So that's the whole purpose of this peer speech review. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who will facilitate this segment.
Thanks, Jay. Yes, this is a peer review section. So we generally go, first of all, ask you to give us some background on the speech, and then also how you think you did in the speech, and then thirdly, what kind of feedback you want, anything special that you want. So, and then I will take over. So I turn that back over to you. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, Julie, thanks a lot. So this little background on this speech, I titled this speech Effective Altruist. And this was a speech that I recorded for the Introduction to Public Speaking course. I don't remember, maybe it was a year ago. And I spent a lot of time on this speech. And the reason I gave this speech is because at that time, I was taking this course, Coursera course, from a famous Princeton professor named Peter Singer, and he was teaching a course called Practical Ethics. And one of the lectures, he had a person, I forgot his name, and there were also some students who were talking about this whole altruism. And one of the things the speaker mentioned was why, if you want to be an effective altruist, the career you pick is very important. And the career that he picked that I would have never thought of as the one that I would have picked was in finance or banking. And he gives the reason why finance and banking. And I was pretty persuaded by that. I said, yeah, if you look at it that way, it makes a lot of sense. That if your goal is to help many, you need money. And he gives the reason, he gives examples on how much money if you can make if you go into finance and banking, and if you're very successful, that you could be a very effective altruist and help many people with the amount of money you make, and you can just donate it to effective charity. So there are two components to it. One is why you should pick finance and banking. And then that solves one part of the problem. The other problem is then you have to find the right charity so you can help as many people as possible. So I was kind of moved by it because there were quite a few students that he had in one of the lectures who were talking about that they live a very simple life. They make good money on Wall Street, but they don't really, buy expensive cars or go on vacations and stuff. They get joy out of helping people and contributing to this charity. There's one charity, again, I use it to donate money because what they do is that they have a measurement and finding out which charities does the most good, and they educate you so that you can pick the right charities. And this is something I pointed out in my speech, that we all tend to go by, 90% of the money is going to this charity. And sometimes that's not a good metric. You have to see, who's doing the most good. You got to know exactly what your money is really doing. How is it helping? You're getting the bang for the buck, essentially, if I may use that phrase. So I basically took a lot of the content and kind of made it my own. Some of the statistics that I got was from that course, and it opened my eyes that there are a lot of problems out there, and rather than counting on politicians to solve it, we all today have power to do a lot. And that was the whole point. And I mean, in America, people are very charitable, as it's one of the most charitable countries. But the thing is that you can be very charitable and very strategic even if you're one person. So you don't have to be big NGOs or nonprofit. As an individual, you have a lot of power. You have a lot of say in helping different causes that you believe in. And for that to happen, you have to make money. And that's why we always look down upon finance and banking as like, it's like they just perpetrate scams. They're a bunch of fraudsters. They're just a bunch of greedy people. And after seeing that, I realized that no, if you go into that field, you may like it, but it's then what you do with the money determines, what you really are. And that's what I was convinced, that if you go into finance and banking, and if you're using towards positive causes, then that's a very noble profession. It all depends on what you do, right? As far as that speech is concerned, I put in a lot of time in that speech. I would say I had gone through it a number of times. I used a lot of the techniques that are taught when it comes to persuasive speech. I didn't give that speech live, so I don't know how the audience would react to it. So a lot of the feedback I'm getting was in the course feedback, and sometimes you don't get good feedback from the course. So this would be interesting to see what Julie thought of it. And also, I would like to give that speech live, but it's not a kind of speech that was more for academic purposes. But I just used that topic as a way to increase my public speaking skills. So at this point, I'll stop here and give Julie a chance to give feedback, and then we can then I can come back and say more.
Thanks, Jay. So I will give you some feedback on my general impression, And some things I found that you did really well that I learned from watching this. And then also in the spirit of constructive criticism, I'll pick out one area I think that you could improve on. You could be high on everything, but there's always something we can improve on. So that's by no means a grading of this. So the I got the idea that finance and banking is could be an effective altruistic career, and I think you did that really well because you start off with the conventional counter argument, which is finance is not a career you want to pick for altruism because there's so much greed and blah blah blah. So you know that is part of the people's thinking. So you start off with saying that there is all this, but then you able that you said in order to do good, the answer is money, and you say hope doesn't do it, prayer doesn't do it, but money does. And you said money solve the problems of the world. But I remember in one of our elevator speeches, the key phrase that we all connected to was money made the world go around. So I got that same feeling from here. And then you use, so I like the construct of counter arguments that you use. The other thing I thought I really helped me to understand it was that you use example of people who have money and made major contributions. The Melinda Gates Foundation and also the Buffett contribution. So clearly they were able to do a huge amount of good because of the careers they chose and the power with the money they have. And you said something like, you too can be an effective altruist. Pick the right career. Time is short. And that was motivation for someone to be an altruist because life is important. And then you went on to say there are massive problems. So that gave me motivation that there's massive problems and the career choice I make could make a difference. So by way of, I just thought that was very good. And I thought your arguments were cogent and logical, and you used the real life examples. By way of constructive criticism, I probably, because this is an academic exercise, I did not know what gives you the credential, some of what we talked about last week, and I know this is an older speech, but I want to underscore that because it's something I'm working on, is not just the credibility, right? You could say, like in the introduction here, you say, well, I took this class on practical ethics, and that really opened up my eyes, and I want to share this new vision with you, something that gave me some credibility where you're coming from. And then connection will be something like, of course, solving world problems is something I care deeply about, and I want to blah, 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 blah. So open yourself up to us somehow. So that's the one constructive criticism I want to make is how do you open up my heart, my ears, so that I listen to you. And that's something I'm working on, my persuasive speech, and that's something I have to look at. And that's it. I hope you like my feedback, and if you have any questions, please feel free.
No, Julie, that was excellent. That's an excellent feedback. I think the one that you mentioned, one of the constructive criticism, I think that's really fair, and I think it was fair the last time. And why? And I completely agree with you on that. The problem that with this, the reason I mentioned that this was part of a course is that we do have that time limit. So if you start, and still that's not an excuse, but I can see why I may not have done that. And normally, it's a fair comment. I'm not saying that's an excuse or anything. I think what you're saying is spot on. That credibility has to be built very quickly, even though it's an academic exercise. But academic exercise still is really a practice for real life. And what you said is really true. That you have to established and it's not like you have to be the Bill. This is not a speech that only Bill and Melinda Gates can give. It can be given by anybody who is an altruist or who believes in it. Of course, if you're not doing it, then, or if you're like, say, I'm convinced and I now am convinced, that's good enough, because not everybody's in a position. Like if you're a student, let's say, right, and you believe that you can give this speech and saying, listen, I'm not earning money, but now after knowing more about it, I'm convinced that this is the path that I want to pursue, or at least I'm going to try hard to pursue. That gives you some credibility. So credibility, I think, is a very important part that you're mentioning here. And for those who are watching this, I think Julie is pointing out something that is very important when you're giving a speech, because people need to know, why is it that you are, and this is something we're going to get to the next speech when we look at Simon Sinek, start with why. And I think, Julie, what you're saying is credibility addresses that. You're starting with why. Like, why
Yes.
are you the one telling me this? Why are you so interested in this thing? And once you give that, the how and the what kind of follow along. It's a natural progression. Like, okay, once I got the why, the how, it's okay, that's your how, but I can figure it out. But now I'm convinced of why. I will do the how any way I want to, but at least now I know why you're doing it. I'm more likely to listen to your how and the results that may follow from that. So this dovetails very nicely to the next speech that we're going to review. And I think I'll let you talk about, is that what you're really saying, that credibility addresses that why part?
I think it's credibility and connection. You know, you could be an expert on ethics, but if I don't care about you or you don't care about me, I still won't listen to you. I won't buy your product. So it's not like he says, we'll talk about it later, is employees and sell to customers who share your belief, right? So now here I'm saying, speak to people who share your belief, right? So once you know, like I know you're passionate about practice leading to perfection, because your enormous commitment here. And I know that you're committed about communication and public speaking because of all the lectures I've listened to, all your speeches. So I have implicit connection to you. I'll listen to anything you say. But just in terms of, I'm just thinking out loud here, is any speech I make or anything I do, I need to convey my belief in a way that is passionate, somehow gives me credibility. If it's not credentials, then maybe my passion, and then the connection. So credibility and connections are the two things that establishes a relationship. And so in a speech, it's a relationship. You know, you want me to listen to your speech, that's a relationship. So connection and credibility, but not necessarily credentials, right? Credentials is just a part of credibility. But without credibility and connections, even if I care about the topic, if I don't think you're worth listening, I still won't listen, you know.
Yeah, no, that's I agree that, and I think that's something I need to really make sure. I need to write it down, that credibility, and I think it follows what we're going to talk about next with Simon Sinek's speech. That even when it comes to speaking, you need to start with why, and I always think of a speech as a product, right? And when he's explaining, because when you're speaking, it is a product that you are trying to sell. Otherwise, why are you speaking? That's always the question. That if you don't have an objective giving a speech, then you're just making noise. And why are you making noise? Why are you subjecting somebody to, unless you're singing or something, you shouldn't be subjecting people. So you have to view your speech as a product. And what Simon Sinek says, again, I'm now moving segment 3 into segment 2 here, is that why that you're talking about, that connection and credibility. The credibility is the why, that leads to connection, and that leads to probably acceptance or understanding or even paying attention. So at this point, we'll close out this segment so that we can move to the Simon Sinek speech and have more of a discussion around this, what he's talking about, since he's formalized it into his golden circle methodology. Okay?
Okay. I'll be right back.
Okay. So while Julie is she comes back. So that what she said there is very important, that you need to get the why out of the way quickly, because that's what gives you the credibility and also makes people connect with you, that you have some purpose. And when it comes to a speech, you need to show that there is indeed a purpose behind what you're saying. Yes, I'm going to take a brief pause. I was just expanding on what you had said about credibility and connection. So at this point, I'm going to take a brief pause and then get started with segment 3. Okay? Okay. Welcome to Speech Talk Live, episode 13, segment number 3. And in this segment, we're going to look at a public speech that was delivered by Simon Sinek, titled Start With Why. And this was a speech that Simon Sinek gave a while back, and it went viral. And I like this speech because he simplifies something that he had been thinking about. And this is one of those things where insight matters, right? And his insight was this thing that he refers to as the golden circle. Like, what tends to get people, what creates movement, what gets people to buy what you have to sell. And what he's saying here is that it all starts with why, your purpose. What is your intention? Why are you doing it? And why has to be something deep that people believe in, that they can latch onto. It's not necessarily money. Money, as he points out in the speech, is a result of that. That may result of it. Like, we have a why. Julie and I and Soumyan and Latesh, when they joined, we have a why. The why in this case is we want to get people to become a better speaker. That's our why. We don't make any money on this. At some point, who knows, maybe we'll become billionaires, but that's not the reason why we do this. We do this because we enjoy it. We think that doing this show makes us better. It makes us much more effective when it comes to communicating with other people. And in the process, if it means that we can help each other or people who want to join us and also develop their skill, and if that happens, that's great. That's what we're looking for. Now, if that somehow says that if we can turn this into a product that becomes monetizable, then that's just the result of it. That's not why we're doing it. Because if this was all about money, then why would we take all this time preparing for this, creating this, then participating in this call for an hour? It's just not worth it. If that's what our intention was, this would have never gone up to a 13th episode. It would have been over after maybe one episode, saying, oh, Julie, you know, we did that show, and guess what? You and I are the only one who viewed it, and that's the end of it. So now we're not going to do anymore. We're done. That's it. It's over. That's not how it works, okay? And what Simon Sinek shows in that speech is that if you don't have a real solid why, then other people are not going to believe in it. They're just not going to believe in it. They're just going to, it's very hard to sell a message when people don't know why you're doing it. And that kind of goes back to what Julie was saying, that whenever you're speaking, you need to start with the why quickly first, so that people know, oh, I get it. Oh, now I see it. Oh, now I know how to do it. Now I know what that results in. And that's how he gives examples of Apple as a product that people understand Apple's why, that you want to be different, you want to think differently, so that when they come out with different products, people don't view it as a what, they view it as they understand the why, and they understand that this is the what that results from their why, that they want you to be different, they want you to be able to think different. Their products allow you to do that, and people get it. They viscerally get that message. So Apple is very successful. Then he gives an example, an old example of Wright brothers, where the person who should have developed the plane was this person named Langley, but as it turned out, his why just wasn't that compelling. That after the Wright brothers, flew the first plane, built the first plane, he could have then, if he had a strong why, he could have said, "Hey, that's great. Let's collaborate and make it even better, so that we can actually, transport people back and forth, make a better plane." But instead, he just quit. And then the last one that he gives is that the why, and this is the one that becomes much more clearer when he gives an example of Martin Luther King. And what he says there is very important. The why, it's not like when Julie and I, our why has to be your why. You're not going to join or participate on this show so that Julie and I can brag about, like, let's see, we had like 10 participants today. Oh, we had so many participants that we had to turn down people from joining. That's not the reason why that's not the thing. The reason you're joining is because it's going to help you. And what he says in that, and then Martin Luther King, is that all the people there attended that speech by Martin Luther, I Have a Dream speech, was for themselves. They were not there for Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King ultimately he inspired them, but they felt that by being there, that they're somehow being part of that movement of civil rights. They were doing it for themselves. And that's what the why has to be. The why has to be such that everybody can relate to it and saying, that can be my why. I believe in it. I believe in it. You're just basically the vessel, right, of conveying the why. But that why also has to be your why, that it can resonate and you can believe in it. So I thought that the message of that speech was very compelling. He simplifies something that's quite complex. The other thing that he does is that there are three parts to it, like why, how, and what. And he pretty much gives just three examples if you look at it. He gives the Apple, he gives the Wright brothers, and then he gives the Martin Luther King. So the construction of the speech is really very well done. And he does give one example to show what happens when the why is not that compelling, with the TiVo example that he gives. So I think that some of the techniques that he uses in the speech are very effective. And what makes the speech very effective is he takes something that can be quite complex and he simplifies it to that golden circle. And that's one of the things that, if your speech is taking something that simplifies it so that anybody can come away saying like, "Oh, I get it, that makes a lot of sense," then you're a very good speaker, okay? And that's what he does here, and that's why the speech went viral, and that's why I included it, because there's a lot that one can learn from it. So I'll, at this point, let Julie give her input and what she thought of that speech.
Am I on? Yeah, Jay, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this speech. He clearly did do the discussion on simplifying what makes people tick, how to get people on your side, and he went through the belief, the how, and the what. Two things that I think he's underlined. Two things that I really noticed. One is with respect to content, is when he talks about the brains, that there's, the limbic brain, the neocortex, and the basal, the body, the gut, and that trust is something you need, and it's a feeling. There's no capacity for language. I think that's what I'm talking about when we talk about in the previous segment about connection, is to have trust, but also goodwill, So I want my audience to support me. And actually failures does that. If I miss a sentence, or if I go as long as it's not 80% of the speech, audience will support me and have goodwill toward me. So I think his explanation of motivation, which is the underlying reason why you want to start with why, is really, I thought was very innovative. And then he went on to say why Apple's doing, how Apple uses that why. That was very, very powerful. So yes, he simplified it with the example, but he lent credibility to his thesis by using biology. Finally, so that's how I see the structure of the speech. That makes sense. And in terms of techniques that I found very attractive, like the law of attraction, kind of attracting, was his constant repetition, which underscores your point that people don't remember much, especially in a speech. So his constant repetition, and I wrote it down because I already forgot, like get people to work with you who share your beliefs, right? Hire people who share your beliefs, appeal to customers who share your beliefs. So work with people who share your beliefs. So I think that's his constant mantra. And the second thing that is even beyond that, which I think is his particular gift, is his voice projection. It was very comforting and soothing, and yet it was exciting at the same time. So embrace the idea of ease and excitement, which is seeming paradox. But I think his voice did that without he ever saying a word. That's what he's doing. He wants to make you feel comfortable, but he also wants you to feel excited. So that's what. So I think he did use techniques, and I think his organization was excellent.
Yeah, there was other thing that you wanted to point out about his humor. Do you want to point out how he uses humor effectively in that speech?
I didn't take any notes on that. Maybe
okay.
You can.
Right. No, I thought that when we were discussing humor, you wanted to. Anyway, if you look at his speech, he's not really trying to be funny, but at certain points of the speech, there were quite a few opportunities where the way he tackles the issue turns into a humorous part of it. Like when he says, like, if Apple basically said, listen, we have this performance, that performance, you want to buy it. Like, I thought that was funny, right? That's like, you get a smile out of that. Like, yeah, if somebody sold us something like that, because we know, and the reason why that's funny is because humor travels faster than the speed of light, I feel, right? By that, I thought the reason why I thought that was so effective is that's how most people sell. That's how most of us try to sell things. Hey, listen, like let's just say this particular show, we could easily say, hey, we do a speech talk live, it's on Google Hangout, and you should be on it. And everybody's going to say, huh? Should be on like what? Just because you're doing Google Hangout? But then if you start with why, that, you can say, I want to become a better speaker. The only way to become a better speaker is by doing it. And this is an opportunity where not only we do it, but we get other people also involved so that they can do it too. Now people understand the why, and they're more likely to come on and saying, you know what, if you're doing it, then maybe I can take that step, even though incrementally, and do it like you are doing it. So that gets them to understand your why, that at one point you were like me, but you took that step to get to that next level. I can do that too. So I think that start with why applies to just about anything. When you look for a job, and this is something that I had to do with my daughter in the beginning. She was looking for a particular type of job, and she didn't quite understand why she was not resonating. Then I said, listen, you got to go into an interview with why you are doing what you're doing. They may not like it, but that's their problem. There's nothing you can do about that, right? But they need to understand why you want to do what you want to do, whether it's PR, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing. And if they understand your why, the how part is teachable. They'll teach you the how part. And that's exactly what happened. And she's now working for a company called Mashable. And that's how that worked out, right? Because in the beginning she was having difficulty getting a job. Then once I had a brief discussion, because kids don't listen to their parents. I mean, that's nothing new, right? You probably discovered that. They just don't. They think that the parents are total, dolts. They don't know anything. And then after she had some hard knocks, then she finally came to me and said, "Dad, I don't know what I'm doing wrong." And I said, "Well, let's figure this out. And why don't you focus on why you want to do what you're doing? And if you focus on that, then you can kind of control the entire interview, because it's going to be based on your why, not like, hey, I can meet this, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that." I said, that doesn't really resonate. And once she started doing it, she suddenly started getting offers. And she was like, after a while, the next problem I had to solve was which offer she should accept. And I'm like saying, that's a good problem, but it's not a problem that I want to solve. You have to determine that. So I think what Simon Sinek is hitting here is very practical. It's something that we all should be doing. And anything, whether it's this show, Speech Talk Live has to have a compelling why. If it doesn't have a compelling why, then the only people that'll ever be doing this will be me and Julie. But the fact is that we do have a compelling why. But there's a different problem. But I don't want to get into that. So in anything, whatever you're doing, you need to have a why. Even when you're meeting people at an event, and this is another common thing, Julie, that you can probably address, that when you meet people socially, they'll always tell you what they do, right? Because that's a place where people are always willing to, like, here's what I do. And you never really find out, like somebody, like, let's say, I'm a doctor. That's what you do. I've never heard any doctor ever tell me why they're a doctor, right? They just don't. People just don't ever, like I tell my dad, you're an accountant. Why are you an accountant? Most people never even give thought to that. Why are you doing it? Like, why are you a doctor? That is very important. And a lot of times I see a lot of people doing things, but I don't know why they're doing it. And I'm interested. I want to know why they're doing it. Like, I go to therapy and I ask people, why are you a therapist? And they tell me because that gets them to tell their story. And they said, oh, I remember when I was little, I got injured and I saw what the therapist did to me and how much improvement I made. And from there, I decided that this is what I wanted to do. I'm sold on that. When I hear that, I think very highly of the therapist who's working with me. But when I just see a therapist like, just do this, do that, I'm not sure that it's just going through the motions is enough. I need to know their why. Anyway, so and any closing thoughts, Julie?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Yeah, so my why for doing this speech and my workshops and all that is that fundamentally I want people to be happy. I want to be happy, and I want people to be happy. And I've made this link that whatever success means, success is a major component of happiness, especially if you get to define what success is. But one of the things I found is the underlying fabric of success is clarity of thought and clarity of communication. And public speaking is a major cornerstone for clarity of thought, as well as clarity of communication. In public speaking, for example, in the impromptu speech, it's really 20, however many, it's a quickie process for you to learn, for me to learn. And I knew that because a lot of my works was in systems analysis and design. But the impromptu speech encapsulates that process so well, so simply for everybody, that I think it's a really great tool for engendering a way to think of things clearly. And then to communicate it, I think I agree with you, and you've said this many times in many different ways, that public speaking is not something you can watch a video or read a book and be successful at that. You have to put the rubber on the road. You have to practice. So I want to participate and support you and us in creating a forum where people can practice public speaking for clarity of thought and communication so that they can be successful at whatever they do, so that they can be happy. So that's my chain of whys that lead into why I'm doing this.
Yeah. Now, see, once you do that, once you explain it like that, then what you're going to say afterwards, people then start saying, I get it. Because what the why that you're saying is their why too. If it isn't, then why would they be interested, right? So
Right.
the why, like when Apple, like when people went to see Martin Luther King, they were all interested in civil rights. Martin Luther King just was kind of leading that, but they all believed in what he believed, and they're willing to support him, right? And Martin Luther just basically was galvanizing people, saying, "Hey, this is how I'm thinking. Are you thinking the same way? If you're thinking the same way, let's all work together to make this happen." And that's exactly what happened. And similarly, I want to touch upon one thing you said that was very important there, and it has to do with practice. One of the things that people don't quite sometimes understand is that speaking has a lot of different parts to it. It's not just you're just giving a speech and it's done. It's not a one and done thing. And this is something I talked about last week on 4 moments of speech, and you have to think of it that way. There are 4 moments of speech, but when you're giving a speech, you got to break it down. So if you're telling a story, just practice that story separately, and then you integrate the whole speech together and then see how it sounds. So there's constant iteration that goes on, that when you see a speech that really works, that's the level of practice that somebody has gone through for it to work, that they've taken something humorous and seeing how does this fit in. This is exactly what Ronald Reagan used to do. You know, he was known as the great communicator. Whether you agree with his politics or not, the fact is that he was a great communicator simply because he practiced like hell ever since he was remember, it didn't hurt that he was an actor, but also he was an announcer too, I believe. He used to be a sports announcer. So he had perfected that art of telling stories and getting the message across, using his voice effectively. There was a lot of practice that he had done over the years that got him to the point where when he became president, people viewed him as like a great communicator. He was getting right down to the point. I'll give you a perfect example. I remember that when he was running in 1976, and I'm not a Reagan guy, but you know, when somebody is good at something, you got to acknowledge it. And he used to tell people, and I can also give you another example of what Donald Trump does that makes him so effective. So anyway, when Jimmy Carter was the president, the unemployment rate used to be high, and Reagan pretty much boiled it down into a very simple saying, and he used to say that if your neighbor is out of a job, that's a recession. If you're out of a job, that's a depression. Now, anybody can understand that. You don't need any statistics like, okay, well, let's see if the 3/4 are below certain things, then that's a recession. Nobody understands that. But you see when your neighbor's out of a job, and you certainly feel when you're out of a job, right? The other thing I'll point out to you is just recently I was looking at what Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders were saying. And if you watch their speeches, they kind of say the same thing. But Bernie Sanders had a way of saying something like, he said that people in Washington, D.C. are not making good decisions. And he goes on and explains all that, right? But when I watch Trump, do you know how he says that? People in Washington, D.C. are stupid. They just are not smart. And that cuts across very quickly than somebody saying that the people in Washington, D.C. are not making good decisions. Both of them are saying the same thing, that if you're not making good decisions, that means you're kind of stupid, right? But Trump goes right there and says, here's how you're thinking, right? If somebody's not making a good decision, that person must be stupid. And that communication, that simplicity cuts across very quickly. And that's why I think he's doing so well. Not that I agree with anything, but I can see why people are listening to his message, because it's very simple and it's very clear. They're not trying to understand, like, okay, there are so many different options they have that it's hard to make a good decision, and as a result, we're in trouble. He's saying that, look, they're stupid, and I can change that. And people saying, yeah, that's right, I'm going to vote for you. So anyway, I always watch these politicians because you can learn a lot about speaking by watching them, seeing what's working, what's not working. And many times I look at Donald Trump and his speeches get televised, and it's not that what he's saying matters, it's how he's saying it matters. What he's saying, he has this way of saying things that are simple, and then people don't want to. It gets back to your point that people don't remember much. And what Donald Trump is so effective in doing is that he doesn't want you to remember much, because there isn't that much to remember. They said that when he gives a speech, at the debate, he spoke at a third grade level. Somebody analyzed it and said the other speakers all spoke at 8th or 9th grade level. So that means that there was a 5-grade difference between the way he was speaking, and this guy brags about being from Wharton all the time. I don't know what kind of what are they teaching at Wharton? Speak like a 3rd grade? That's a waste of money to go to Wharton if that's what they're teaching these people. That, hey, what we're teaching you could have learned that in 3rd grade, but but if you want to spend $60,000 a year, we'll take it. But at the end, what we're going to tell you is that if you want to be a billionaire, speak like a 3rd grader. I mean, that's an expensive lesson to pay $60,000 a year to get an MBA from a school like Wharton. But anyway, that's pretty much. Any last word before we close out this show, Julie?
No, that's great. Thank you.
All right, Julie, thanks for participating, and thanks for all those who are watching it. If you have any comment and feedback, you can certainly get in touch with me. We'll put all the email and information there. And Julie, is there any way, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, I'll include your email, okay?
Okay, that's great. And also, they can join the Google Community Introduction to Public Speaking Coursera, and I monitor that pretty actively. So.
Right. So if you're watching this and you want to really get to that next step, this is the bridge. This is the bridge for your success. So join us, and we'll all help you get there. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.